1930s Europe, the gates were closing. States were standardizing passports and tightening checkpoints, creating the first modern infrastructure for trackable human movement. This system was built on a single, unwavering physical law. A human body cannot move through space without displacing something else. Every train ticket purchased and every hotel registry signed creates a permanent record. By the mid-30s, intelligence networks believed they had finally eliminated the possibility of a total disappearance. They had constructed a grid of surveillance that assumed every citizen was a traceable, solid object. Within this network, the idea of a clean erasure was considered a mathematical impossibility. If you were in the system, you stayed in the system. Ettore Majorana was a man who lived within the mathematics of that system. One of the most gifted theoretical physicists of his generation, he spent his days calculating the behavior of the invisible world, right up until the moment he applied those same theories to himself. On March 25, 1938, he boarded a ferry from Palermo to Naples. He left behind a series of notes that suggested he was about to vanish, but the manner of his departure didn't follow the predictable path of a missing person. He was a scientist who saw the physical world as a collection of probabilities rather than certainties. To find him, investigators realized they couldn't rely on standard police logic. They had to look at his disappearance through the same quantum lens Majorana used to view the universe. In the standard physics of the era, matter and antimatter were considered distinct opposites. If a particle and its antiparticle ever meet, they annihilate one another, leaving nothing behind but a flash of energy. Majorana's math suggested something else was possible. He proved the existence of a unique class of particles that are their own antiparticles. This is the Majorana fermion. Because it is its own opposite, it exists in a state of absolute neutrality. It can pass through the entire universe without leaving a trace or reacting to the matter around it. This concept of an entity that exists while remaining effectively invisible to the system became the structural blueprint for Majorana's final act. While Majorana explored these abstract particles, the world around him was becoming dangerously concrete. Mussolini's fascist regime was aggressively seeking any scientific advantage that could be converted into military power. Majorana's private notebooks indicate he had calculated the potential for nuclear fission years before his peers. He realized that the energy binding the atom could be unleashed. He was carrying the conceptual framework for a weapon of mass destruction in a society that was currently eager to use one. The pressure of this knowledge began to manifest as a deep existential withdrawal. Faced with the choice of becoming an architect of destruction or a prisoner of the state, Majorana found a third option. He would remove the observer from the experiment. The official inquiry concluded that Majorana committed suicide, leaping from the ferry into the Tyrrhenian Sea. It was a conclusion that required no further tracking and left no body to find. Yet the data immediately began to fracture. Days after he supposedly drowned, Majorana walked into a bank and personally withdrew his entire life savings. Witnesses in Naples claimed to see him stepping off a train. Shortly after, reports surfaced of a man matching his description living in a Jesuit monastery, followed by sightings of a similar figure in Argentina. By intentionally generating these conflicting, verifiable records, Majorana placed his life into what physicists call a macroscopic superposition. To the state, he was now simultaneously dead in the ocean, hiding in a cell, and living in another hemisphere. He used his understanding of information to turn his identity into an unsolvable paradox, making it impossible for any authority to claim his location. For decades, these stories were treated as myths, but in the 2010s, the Italian government officially reopened the file to apply modern digital analysis to the century-old mystery. When investigators analyzed a 1959 photograph from Caracas, Venezuela, facial recognition software identified a man with a near-perfect skeletal match to the missing physicist. He was alive, decades after his official death. This discovery confirmed that a single individual, operating without a modern intelligence agency, had successfully navigated the checkpoints of World War II and the scrutiny of the Cold War. Majorana's escape suggests that his understanding of the system's architecture allowed him to move through it without being captured by it. He proved that even a global net of surveillance has gaps if you know exactly where to step. Today, we live in a world where our identities are built from millions of digital fragments, creating the illusion that our lives are permanent and perfectly tracked. But Majorana's story remains a warning. It suggests that if you understand how a system gathers and stores information, you retain the ability to manipulate that data. It raises the question of whether we are truly as visible as we think, or if there are still ways to slip through the glowing cracks of our modern grid. How much of what we know about the people in our lives is based on fact, and how much is just the data they've chosen to leave behind? Majorana showed that absolute autonomy is still possible for those who understand the rules of the void. He didn't just disappear. He chose to become a ghost in the machine.